They laughed at my husband in front of 400 people at my own wedding. They thought he was a broke, boring old man until the team that manages his billion-dollar trust walked in. This is Evelyn. I'm 61 years old. My own family tried to play me, and instead, I walked away with everything. Watch this to the very end. Before I continue, please subscribe to this channel and hit the bottom. It lets me keep sharing these stories with you. Also, let us know where you're listening from in the comments. Seeing listening from my car or folding laundry at midnight reminds me exactly who I'm doing this for. The reception hall shimmered like a dream. Chandeliers glowing, soft jazz weaving through voices, and every table draped in ivory linen rimmed with gold. You could smell the sugared roses on each plate, the warm butter rolls, the perfume and cologne of 400 guests, some familiar, some invited out of obligation. It was the kind of room designed to impress people who thought they'd already seen everything. I was wearing pale blue lace, something soft, something that said I didn't need to shout to be seen. The fabric skimmed my skin when I moved, delicate but firm, like it knew how to hold its own shape. And beside me stood Daniel, my new husband, tall, still, steady in a way most men aren't anymore. He wasn't flashy, wasn't loud, just grounded, the kind of man who doesn't need to prove anything. Being next to him felt like standing beside a closed door that you know will not slam on you. But apparently, that wasn't enough for my daughter-in-law. She leaned in toward her friends, 3 women she treats like an audience more than friends. Glass in hand, elbow rested on the white-draped table like she was settling into a comedy show. One ankle crossed over the other, her body language loose, casual, confident in the worst way. Her voice cut through the hum of laughter like a blade dipped in honey. Sweet on the surface, poisonous underneath. Emily. Seriously? That's who she married? They laughed. All 3 of them. Emily's glass tilted back, her smile smug. One of them half covered her mouth, like it made the insult cuter. The third just stared straight ahead, eyes bright, soaking in the drama. I saw a few heads turn. Not a lot. Just enough. The kind of small shift that tells you people heard more than they want to admit. Phones lifted. I caught at least 2 women recording with that little sideways glance, pretending they weren't. Their screens glowed in their hands like tiny, silent spotlights. Daniel didn't react. He didn't flinch, didn't smile or shrink. He just stood there, hands folded in front of him, like a mountain letting wind pass over. His calm made their noise feel small. I felt something deep inside me stretch, then go quiet. It was the part of me that used to rush in to smooth things over, to explain, to defend. At 61, that part is tired. It has learned that people will say what they are if you let them. I didn't walk over, didn't tell her to stop, didn't ask her why she'd humiliate her own family like that. I knew exactly why. Humiliation is a mirror people hold up when they're afraid someone else might look more complete than they feel. I just stepped back, gently, like checking my heel, and looked at my watch. The tiny second hand slid smoothly along the face, indifferent to weddings, insults, and egos. I had timed it to the minute. I felt that quiet buzz of certainty in my chest, like a lock turning, because the real entrance hadn't happened yet. The DJ was prepping another round of music, something upbeat, forgettable, and waiters were placing little tarts on each table when the doors at the back opened. You could hear the faint clatter of plates, the soft squeak of shoes against polished floor. A few people turned their heads, expecting late guests or staff. Not rushed, not dramatic, just clean, intentional, like the kind of people who don't need to be introduced. They entered in suits, polished, elegant, 3 men, 2 women, one with a thin folder tucked under his arm, another holding a coat that didn't belong to him. They didn't look at the guests, they looked for one person only. Their eyes skimmed the room until they found Daniel. They walked straight toward Daniel. No hesitation, no detours. The first one reached him with a firm handshake and a voice that carried. Man, we've been looking for you. The words cut neatly across the music, not loud, but clear. Then the second one. Woman, we're ready to finalize everything. Her tone was calm, efficient. That was not the voice of someone making small talk over cake. Daniel nodded once. Calm, like he'd been expecting them all evening. I stepped forward. I didn't raise my voice, didn't touch the mic. I just let the music and chatter do what they were doing and slipped my words right into the center of it all. Me. Everyone. These are the people who report to my husband. And just like that, the laughter died. No fade, no murmurs. Just silence. It was immediate, like someone had hit a mute button. The room felt suddenly heavier, as if the air itself had paused to listen. Like someone had taken the remote and turned the volume down on the whole room. Emily's face froze in place. Her hand was still holding the glass mid-air, but her eyes were wide now. Her friends stopped smiling. One of them blinked like she didn't understand what was happening. The one with the phone recording lowered it an inch. Because this man they had just ridiculed, was not some quiet nobody. He was the CEO of a trust consulting group that managed over $1 billion in assets. He had retired quietly, stayed off LinkedIn, didn't tell a soul. He never cared about showing off. He had always told me, power that needs applause is just insecurity in a tuxedo. Quiet. Power, he said, sleeps just fine at night. He only cared about protecting what mattered, including me. After years of putting other people first, I had finally chosen someone who knew how to stand between me and the storm without needing the world to clap for him. I let the moment breathe, let it stretch so no one in that room could pretend they hadn't seen it. I could feel the heat rise behind me, not anger, but awareness. The difference between looking and finally seeing. It felt like time had slowed just enough for the lesson to sink in. Daniel turned and shook the hands of each person who had come. No words needed. There were quiet nods, brief smiles, a few low sentences traded that no one else could quite hear, and I just watched Emily. I watched the confidence leak out of her posture, slow and visible, like air hissing out of a balloon. She was trying to figure out how to backpedal without losing face, maybe wondering if she could laugh it off later, twist the story, say she hadn't meant it that way. But her laugh had already been heard, her words recorded. Screens had captured her tone, her expression, the timing. She didn't know. This was the beginning of something she wouldn't be able to laugh off. Silence is heavier than sound when it lands all at once. You could hear the clink of a fork being set down somewhere near the back, a chair scraping slightly, someone clearing their throat and stopping halfway through, 400 people suddenly unsure where to look. The music kept playing, but it felt far away. Emily's smile cracked first. Not dramatically, just enough, like porcelain under pressure. She leaned closer to her friends, whispering too fast, hands fluttering now instead of posing. The glass in her hand caught the chandelier light and shook with her. Emily. I didn't mean it like that. I was joking. Her voice trembled. The joke had no audience anymore. The 3 women around her didn't laugh this time. One pretended to adjust her napkin. Another took a sudden sip of water. The third stared at the centerpiece as if the roses had become urgent business. I stayed where I was, close enough to be seen, far enough not to rescue her. My heels felt steady under me, because I had spent years rescuing her, years of smoothing things over, of explaining her tone, of telling my son she didn't mean it that way, of apologizing for things I didn't do so holidays would stay peaceful. Some betrayals don't leave bruises, just silence, the kind that settles in your chest and teaches you to stop expecting fairness. You learn to swallow little comments like pills. Daniel placed his hand gently at the small of my back, not protective, just present. A quiet signal that he saw everything, that I didn't have to hold myself together alone. His palm was warm through the lace of my dress, steady, unmoving. I had been married before, to a man who filled rooms with noise and left very little space for me. Noise is not the same as support. One of the women who had entered leaned toward me slightly. Her voice was warm, but professional. Woman. Mrs. Carter, we'll need a quiet place to review the final signatures later this week. Mrs. Carter. Emily flinched. I saw it in the way her shoulders tensed. The way her hand tightened around the glass. In her mind, that title was supposed to settle on her one day, not on the woman she liked to treat as temporary. She had never called me that, never used my name without trimming it down or wrapping it in sarcasm. I was always just Mom, or worse, nothing at all. A presence in the kitchen, a wallet, a babysitter. I nodded slowly. Me. Of course. We'll coordinate through the office. Office. That word landed like a dropped plate. A few guests glanced at each other, eyebrows raised. Office meant structure, systems, staff, not just an older woman with a checking account and a pension. I saw Emily's eyes dart to Daniel again, this time not measuring his suit or posture, but searching for proof she hadn't misjudged everything. She looked at the folder in the man's hand, at the calm on Daniel's face, at the way the woman spoke to me without hesitation. She had. I caught fragments of whispers drifting around the room. Did you know? No, I thought he was retired. Apparently retired doesn't mean irrelevant. Someone laughed nervously, too loud, too late. Emily finally stood. Her chair legs screeched against the floor. She smoothed her dress, squared her shoulders, and walked toward us like confidence was something she could grab on her way across the room. Emily. Evelyn, I'm so sorry if I offended you. You know I have a dry sense of humor. She smiled, wide, desperate, the kind of smile that tries to drag you into pretending nothing happened. I looked at her, really looked. The mascara slightly smudged at the corner of her eye, her grip on the stem of her glass too tight. I remembered a Thanksgiving years ago in Ohio. Snow piling up outside, her sitting at my table, scrolling on her phone while I cooked all day, my son half asleep on the couch. She had smiled at me then, too. Emily. You didn't have to go so overboard, you know. We would have been fine with takeout. She thought it was harmless, a joke. My hands had stilled over the sink, the soapy water cooling around my fingers while I swallowed my hurt and laughed it off. I told myself she was young, that she'd grow out of it. Back then, I rescued her. Me. You didn't offend me. That was the truth. Her shoulders loosened. Just a little. Me. You revealed yourself. That smile finally disappeared. For the first time that night, I saw her without the performance. Daniel didn't speak. He didn't need to. Authority doesn't argue. It just exists. Emily's voice dropped. Emily. I didn't know. You never said. I tilted my head. Thought of all the times I'd been there, invisible and paying for everything, of all the questions she never asked because she assumed the answers. Me. You never asked. She opened her mouth, closed it, looked around. Too many witnesses now. Too many people who had seen her laugh before understanding the room had changed. They called me selfish right before they stole everything I earned. That memory pressed in at the edges of the night, the day they sat across from me at my own kitchen table, talking about simplifying things, how moving accounts temporarily would help manage taxes, how combining money for the family would be easier in the long run. I had spent decades building stability, working, saving, raising my son after his father passed, quiet nights where loneliness hummed louder than any TV, signing forms in that same kitchen, hoping I was doing it right. When I chose Daniel, I didn't choose flash. I chose peace. Someone who read the fine print. Someone who didn't see my age as a countdown, but as proof I'd survived things he respected. Emily mistook that for weakness. She saw his quiet as emptiness, my generosity as a resource she could count on without asking permission. I leaned closer so only she could hear me. Me. She smiled like I was the joke. I made sure I was the punchline instead. Her eyes filled, not with regret, with fear. She stepped back, murmured something about needing air. Her friends didn't follow. Their chairs stayed where they were. Their eyes stayed on their plates. Suddenly, they were very interested in their phones and their silverware. Funny how fast loyalty evaporates when status shifts. The music started again, soft, careful, like the DJ wasn't sure what volume was safe now. The night continued, conversations resumed, but the energy had changed. Laughter came back in shorter bursts. People chose their words more carefully. Eyes tracked Daniel as he moved, then slid toward me and away again. They weren't watching me anymore. They were watching him. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something settle into place inside me, not triumph. Clarity. I didn't sleep much that night, not because I was upset. I have known real upset before. Hospitals, funeral homes, bank statements that did not make sense. This was different. This was my body adjusting to a truth it had carried quietly for years, that the version of me who apologized for peace was gone. Sleep came in thin slices. I would close my eyes, see Emily's face freeze in that reception hall, hear her laugh, then the silence that followed. I would open my eyes again and stare at the dark ceiling, listening to the soft rhythm of Daniel's breathing beside me. The reception had ended politely. Smiles, handshakes, compliments layered with curiosity. People touched my arm, told me how beautiful everything was, slipped in little questions about Daniel, about the visitors in suits, about the word office. I let their words swirl past me like smoke. Daniel and I left early, slipping out under the soft yellow lights of the parking lot, the air cool against my skin. The night smelled like damp pavement and cut grass. In the car, neither of us spoke for a while. The engine hummed. Streetlights passed like steady heartbeats on the windshield. My shoes were off, my feet resting on the mat, the lace of my dress gathered neatly at my knees. I watched our reflections in the window. A woman in her 60s, hair pinned up, a man with kind eyes. Then Daniel reached for my hand. Daniel, you handled that exactly the way it needed to be handled. His thumb brushed over my knuckles. Gentle. Certain. I looked out the window and felt something release in my chest. A tightness I had been carrying since long before that wedding. I did not ruin her. I just stopped protecting her from consequences. The aftermath came fast. By morning, my phone was buzzing. Missed calls, texts stacked on top of each other, my son first, then Emily, then my sister asking if everything was okay because she had seen something online. A clip. Just 12 seconds. Emily's laugh, the words, the entrance, the silence. Someone had posted it before dessert. I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee I forgot to drink, sunlight cutting across the floor in long bright lines. The house was quiet. The refrigerator hummed, the kind of quiet that used to feel lonely. Now it felt earned. My phone buzzed again. Emily. I watched it light up, watched her name flash on the screen. Let it ring. She called again. I let it ring again. Then the text came. Emily. Evelyn, please. I'm getting messages. People are twisting things. Twisting. I remembered all the times she had twisted my words, my boundaries, my kindness into permission. The way she would tell my son I had agreed to things I had never even heard about. The way she would roll her eyes and say I was overreacting when I tried to set a limit. Some betrayals do not leave bruises. Just silence. I replied once. Me. I didn't twist anything. I stood still. Then I set the phone face down on the table. The next message did not come. No long apology. No, I was wrong. Just that one attempt to make the story about what other people were doing to her. That afternoon, my son came by. I heard his car in the driveway, the crunch of tires on gravel. The front door opened slowly. He stood in the doorway like a boy again, unsure if he was allowed in. Son. Mom. One word, soft, heavy. I gestured to the chair. He sat, hands clasped, eyes down. Me. You saw it. He nodded. Son. Mom. I did not know she said things like that. I believed him, not because she had not given him clues, but because some men are trained not to listen to the tone behind the words. I folded my hands on the table. Me. You did not ask. He exhaled. Son. She feels embarrassed. I met his gaze. Me. So did I. For years. That was the moment something shifted. Just a quiet rearranging of the truth between us. He looked down at his hands again. Son. I should have asked you sooner. I did not rush to comfort him. I did not say it was fine. It was not. and he needed to feel that. We sat like that for a while, two people who loved each other finally looking at the same picture. Emily never apologized. Not really. There was no accountability, just distance, fewer invitations, group messages I was left out of, holidays arranged in ways that did not require my presence, a careful avoidance that told me everything I needed to know. And I was fine with that. I stopped chasing people who only opened the door halfway. Daniel and I filed the paperwork the following week. Trust adjustments, estate planning, layers of legal language that might have scared me once. Now they felt like armor. Everything notarized and filed properly through the county clerk, quiet, clean, irreversible. We sat in a small office that smelled like toner and old paper. The clerk slid documents toward us. Daniel read each line, then looked at me before he signed. Daniel: "You sure you are okay with this structure, Evelyn?" Me: "I am more than okay with it. I am choosing it." He smiled. Power does not need an audience. It just needs clarity. By the time we walked out, the afternoon sun was warm on my face. My future was not in anyone else's hands anymore. Not my son's. Not Emily's. Mine. On Thanksgiving, Daniel and I stayed home. No long drive. No rushing to make 3 side dishes just to have them critiqued. No pretending not to hear comments about my age, my spending, my choices. We cooked a small meal, turkey, green beans, stuffing from a recipe my mother used to make, a pie we burned slightly and laughed about anyway. Outside, leaves skittered across the driveway. The sky was a soft gray. Inside, warmth held steady. The oven, the lamps in the living room, Daniel's laugh from the couch when the football game went into overtime. We ate at the table I had once crowded with other people's needs, just the two of us. No tension. Halfway through the meal, Daniel put down his fork. Daniel: "How do you feel, really?" I looked at my plate, at the slightly burned edge of the crust. I realized then I was not angry anymore. I was done. Done begging for respect that should have been basic. Done explaining myself to people who had already decided I was less. Done apologizing for existing as more than a supporting character in their story. She stole my story. I rewrote the ending, not with revenge, with boundaries, with signatures on legal paper, with quiet holidays that did not require me to shrink. I did not need her approval. I did not need their applause. I walked away with clarity, with partnership, with peace that did not require permission. That night, I went to bed in a house that finally felt like mine in every sense. I lay beside a man who saw me, fully, and did not flinch. I closed my eyes and, for the first time in a long time, sleep came quickly. If you liked this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments.